Hello everybody, my name is Asher, and in this video I thought it would be a fun idea to basically try to predict every NFL team's regular season standings in the 2024 season. And just a disclaimer before I start the video, I'm not necessarily an expert when it comes to the NFL, and this is my first video doing predictions, but I have done a pretty good amount of research for every NFL team, and I am pretty passionate about the NFL, so I wanted to take a crack at it. Once the season's over, we'll see how well or bad my picks were. That being said, I'm going to start with the AFC teams, and I'll do an easy division first, starting off with the AFC West, and I'm going in order from first to fourth place in the divisions. So obviously the team that's going to win AFC West this year is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs, and I have them going 13-4 and are going to be the second seed. The Chiefs are in a great position right now. They're the only NFL team that has a dynasty currently. They have an amazing roster, and their schedule this year for the most part is not hard. They've been owning their division for years now, and this year they face the NFC South, which should be all wins. Since the Patrick Mahomes era, they have won 4 AFC championships and 3 Super Bowls, and are on a 2 Super Bowl win streak. And the only NFL team that has stopped the Chiefs in the postseason that still has the same roster mostly active is the Cincinnati Bengals. And here are the games that I think the Chiefs will win and lose. And something that I'll point out is that I do have them starting the season 0-2, which I admit is a pretty bold take, but it doesn't really matter how they start. They're going to win their division regardless unless they have serious injuries. Also, just to clarify, the game where I have the Broncos beating the Chiefs is the Chiefs' final game, and by that point, they should win their division with a good lead. So they're going to have all their McDonald's workers playing on the field, and not many of their stars are probably going to play in that game. So even though I hate the Chiefs, they do have a great chance at winning the Super Bowl this year and being the first team to do it 3 times in a row, since they have very little flaws besides getting rid of their best cornerback, L'Jarius Sneed. Next up is the second place rank in the division, which is the same as last year, and that is the Las Vegas Raiders, and I have them going 8-9, which is the same record as before. So overall, I think the Raiders are going to have a decent season and be a solid team. They have a good defense, and I think Antonio Pierce is a good head coach that has bonded with a lot of the players. However, the only thing holding them back is their offense, specifically the quarterback position. This year, Gardner Minshew is their quarterback, and while I think he is solid, he is not really great and can be unreliable. Plus, if Minshew does get injured, Aiden O'Connell will have to take over, which is something no Raider fan wants. Their schedule is also pretty hard this year. They have a lot of tough games, and I have them losing to most of the good teams, but being able to beat the bad teams. Overall, I definitely don't think they'll be worse than their last year record, and I could see them going 9-8 or 10-7 if luck is on their side, but I am going to play it safe and say they'll go 8-9. For number 3 in the division, I have the Los Angeles Chargers going 7-10. And I think this year they will be a decent team because they have a great head coach named Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh has a proven track record with him taking the 49ers to the NFC Championship 3 times in a row and even winning the NFC in 2012. He also won a national championship with Michigan State last year, and I don't have any doubts that he'll be a bad coach. Another positive sign for the Chargers is that they have Justin Herbert, who is a good quarterback, so they don't really have to worry about poor quarterback play unless he gets injured. However, there are some flaws to the Chargers that I think will keep them from having a winning record. Number 1, on paper, the Chiefs and Raiders are definitely more stacked and better than the Chargers in their division. Most of the time when a team gets third in their division, they usually either go 9-8 or they will have a negative record. Number 2, they do not have a stacked supporting cast and have a lot of unproven players on their team, which could definitely hinder them. And number 3, the general management of the Chargers is bad. I mean, it took them like an entire year to fire Brandon Staley after choking to the Jaguars in the playoffs, and they only fired him because he caused another embarrassment against the Raiders game. To summarize the Chargers season, I think they will be a decent team and have mixed results in their wins and losses. And maybe in a year or 2 after some trades and drafts, they could be potentially good. Number 4 in the division is the Denver Broncos. And this is a little bit of a tricky team to rank because don't get me wrong, the Broncos are definitely going to be bad this season. Their team overall does not have much talent outside of Cortland Sutton, and their quarterback situation is pretty bad because if rookie quarterback Bo Nix isn't at least decent, then they're going to have to rely on Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham, which is not going to be good at all. However, Sean Payton is still a great coach, and last season the Broncos, despite all their flaws, they were still able to have a decent record with 8-9, and they definitely are not really as good as their record says, but I think a big reason for that is Sean Payton's coaching. I do see a lot of people saying the Broncos could go 2-15, however, due to Sean Payton, I'm going to have to give them a few more wins, and I have them going 4-13, and I think they can beat the Steelers since for some reason the Steelers seem to lose to teams that are pretty bad, even though they are almost always solid. Up next, we have the AFC East division, and without a doubt, this is definitely the hardest division to rank because I think 3 of the AFC East teams do have at least a chance to win their division, but all 3 of them that have a chance to do so have some pretty major flaws. However, I think the Buffalo Bills will win their division and will be the 4th seed for the playoffs. And don't get me wrong, Buffalo did lose a lot of important people on their team, with Stephon Diggs and Jordan Poyer to name a few. However, they still have Josh Allen, who is not only a top 3 quarterback in the league, but he is without a doubt the best quarterback in the division, and Sean McDermott is also a pretty good head coach despite his flaws. And the other 2 teams that I think could win the division are the Dolphins and Jets. However, they have some major problems too. Only difference is that they haven't proved themselves, unlike the Bills. For example, the Bills have won their division constantly since the year 2020 and have won 5 playoff games since this era. Meanwhile, the Dolphins haven't won a playoff game since the year 2000, and the Jets haven't won a playoff game since 2010. And another thing, despite the Bills having trouble winning their division last season, the Dolphins still choked when they had a clear shot to win it, and the Bills still came out on top, which I'll go more into detail when we talk about the Dolphins picks. So to summarize, even though I hate the Bills, I still think they're going to win their division, and I have them with mixed results in their wins and losses. I have them losing to most teams that are good, like the Chiefs, 49ers, and Texans, while also winning against good teams like the Rams and Lions. I think they'll definitely have at least one embarrassing loss, so I decided to go with the Cardinals in week 1. I have them sweeping the Patriots and Dolphins and going 5-1 in their division. And I don't think they're going to win a playoff game this year, but regardless, I still think they'll win their division with a 10-7 record and will be the 4th seed. Number 2, the Miami Dolphins. So like I said before, I still think the Dolphins could still have a chance to win their division. However, I am going to have to go with 2nd place for them. And don't get me wrong, last year the Dolphins were great. My uncle is a Dolphins fan, so naturally I do watch a lot of their games. And if I wasn't a Bengals fan, then they would probably be my favorite team. However, while I acknowledge that they were great, they also had a lot of flaws and disappointments last season. First off, despite their talent, they struggled to beat teams that had a winning record, with their only win against good teams being the Dallas Cowboys, who also had this problem too. They also had an embarrassing loss against the Titans, where the Titans came back from a 14-point lead. And despite the Bills struggling and the Dolphins having a clear shot at taking the division, they did not get the job done and lost in the wildcard round against the Chiefs. Since the Dolphins have a harder schedule this season, I have them going down from last year with a 9-8 record, and I think they'll struggle to beat good teams, especially while on the road and in the cold, but they should get the job done against the bad and mid teams. Number 3, the New York Jets, and I have them going 9-8, the same as the Dolphins. So there is a lot of good things going on with the Jets this season. They still have the 2nd best NFL defense this season. In fact, that was the main reason why the Jets even had a chance to win any games last season, since their quarterback room was so awful. However, there are 2 flaws that I think will hold the Jets back. First is Aaron Rodgers. Now, Aaron Rodgers is a legendary quarterback, obviously. Everybody knows this since he won a Super Bowl against the Steelers, but he is no longer in his prime anymore. He is 40 years old. Most quarterbacks who are great start to fade out once they are 35 and probably retire around 38. But Mr. Rodgers is also coming out of an injury with his Achilles, so there is concern there that he will either not perform good or he will get injured again. The second concern is that the coaching staff and management of the Jets is honestly not really that good, and I personally just don't have much faith in them. Overall, based off their wins and losses this season, I think they will be a solid team that maybe could have achieved more if they had a more reliable quarterback and better management, but I will give them a 9-8 record. Last place in the division, we have the New England Patriots, which I have them going 3-14. I think it's safe to say the Patriots are most likely going to be a bad team this season, and I think their offense overall is going to be terrible, just like it was last year. However, I think there will be some bright spots for them. They still have a great defense this season, and while their new head coach, Gerard Mayo, has no track record or experience of being a coach, I still think with his long history of playing for the Patriots when they were a dynasty, and him being their former linebacker coach, it'll actually give the team some morale and positive energy. I have the Patriots winning 3 games this season due to their bad offense, but with their defense, I could see them winning maybe 5 games, but I definitely don't think they'll have a 2-15 record, unlike some other prediction channels have said. Next up, we have another hard division to rank, and that's going to be the AFC North. And I think the Cincinnati Bengals will win the division this year, and will go 12-5 and be the 3rd seed. Now, obviously, I am a Cincinnati Bengals fan, so naturally I am going to be biased towards them, but despite their flaws, I do think they have a good chance of winning their division. So one good thing with the Bengals this year is that they have a significantly easier schedule compared to the other 3 AFC North teams. And a big reason why it's like that this year is that the last year the Bengals placed 4th in their division, and despite not having Joe Burrow due to being injured for most of the year and having a bad defense, and they were awful in their division, they still went positive with a 9-8 record and went undefeated against the 5 NFC teams that they faced, which is pretty unbelievable because some of them were pretty good, like the Rams and 49ers. This year I think there is a lot of hope with the Bengals. Now I know I am taking a decent risk with this team, but if Joe Burrow stays healthy and if the defense and offensive line is solid and improved from last year, which it should be, I could see the Bengals winning the division due to their easy schedule. And going over their losses and wins picks, I think most of their losses are going to be against their division. I think they are going to be swept by the Browns since the Bengals do struggle a lot with their defense. I also think the Bengals will have at least one embarrassing loss to a mid/bad AFC team, and I will go with the Titans for that loss. If the Bengals don't have any serious injuries, I could see them maybe winning a Super Bowl if luck is in their favor. And they are clutch since they've proven that they don't need to be a stacked team to do good in the playoffs. Like, for example, when they went to the Super Bowl and when they went to the AFC Championship, because they were definitely not stacked when they had those two successful years. The second place for the North is the Baltimore Ravens, and I have them going 12-5, the same record as the Bengals, and they will be the 5th seed. So the Ravens were a great team last season, and I still think they will be a pretty great team this year, especially since their running game should be improved with Derrick Henry. Now, I do have them losing one more game compared to their last season record, but that is because of their harder schedule this year and their loss of Patrick Queen. I think they're also going to be swept by the Steelers since for some reason they play really bad against them. But overall, I think the Ravens are definitely going to make the playoffs this year. But after their embarrassing performance in coaching last year in the AFC Championship game, which they should have won, I don't think the Ravens will have a deep playoff run this year. Up next for third place, we have the Cleveland Browns, and my prediction for the Dog Pound is that they're going to go 10-7 and be the 7th seed. Overall, the Browns have the best defense in the league, and their offense is good, and Kevin Stefanski is a great coach. Their overall talent is a big reason why I think they will have a good record and make the playoffs. Not to mention last year they had 5 different quarterbacks due to injuries, but despite that they proved themselves to be a team that could still make it to the playoffs. The only real concern for the Browns is, well, Deshaun Watson, and so far for the Browns he hasn't really proven himself, and I don't think he'll be a good quarterback this year. But the thing is, he really doesn't have to be. All he has to do is at least just play decent, and the stacked Browns team should get him at least 10 wins. But to quickly go over the Browns' win and losses, I think they should beat most of the bad teams or the mid teams, and they should win a few games against the good teams like the Bengals, Cowboys, and Ravens. And if for whatever reason Deshaun Watson plays really badly this year and fails to get at least 10 wins, then he should be just cut from the team and start flipping burgers. The last place for the AFC North division is the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I have them going 9-8. Now, I know a lot of Steelers fans are not going to be happy with this placement because they haven't placed last in their division since the year 1988. However, I'm still going to have to say that they will be last in their division because their quarterback roster is very mid and unreliable, and they do not have a stacked team, especially on the offense. They, objectively speaking, have the worst team in the division. However, with Mike Tomlin's skills and voodoo magic and the good defense, despite their last place in the division, they should still go 9-8 and go positive since the Steelers have been doing that since 2003, and I think they should still have the skill to do it this year too. Looking over their wins and losses, I have them doing well against their division games, going 4-2, and I do have them losing to some bad teams like the Broncos and Commanders because last year they did lose to 2 really bad teams like the Patriots and Cardinals. Don't get me wrong, I could definitely see the Steelers not being last in their division, but I only see that happening if the Bengals and Browns have serious injuries because their schedule is really hard, especially in the last few weeks. I mean, it looks like they got hit with the skill-based matchmaking with their final 7 games. So obviously, yes, the Steelers fans aren't going to be happy with me putting them last since they have a long history of them being very competitive in their division, but I am going to have to place them 4th place for now. Next up, we have the AFC South division. I have the Houston Texans winning their division and will be the 1st seed with 13-4 wins. Now, I know I am taking somewhat of a risk with the Texans winning the division and having a high seed, but at the same time, they are the best NFL team in their division on paper. And last year, despite them being a horrible team the year before, they were able to win their division, win 10 games, and won a playoff game while dropping 45 points on the best NFL defense. Now, they did get steamrolled by the Ravens in the divisional round, but that was expected since the Ravens had a more experienced team and were way more stacked compared to the Texans. This year, the Texans got significantly better with their offseason requirement, like Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon. Both the defense and offense looks great, and CJ Stroud had an amazing rookie year, and I don't really see a legitimate reason as to why he would regress. And the coaching staff with head coach DeMeco Ryans is very great. Going over their wins and losses, I have them being a pretty dominant team, but to clarify, the Titans loss is their final game of the regular season, and I have them winning the division by quite a lead, so I have them resting their starters for that game. I know I might be kind of hyping this team up, but I think the Houston Texans do have a great chance at winning a Super Bowl. And I know that they are a young team, but I think they proved themselves last year and are going to be better. Next up for the 2nd place spot in the South, I have the Indianapolis Colts going 10-7 and being the 6th seed. Last year, the Colts were a good and solid football team and almost won their divisions despite them having a backup quarterback. Although this placement of the Colts can definitely backfire on me, I think the team is still good and solid, and I think if Anthony Richardson plays how he did in the beginning of the last year, then they have a good chance at making it to the playoffs. Number 3, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I have them going 7-10. And the reason why I have them going 7-10 is because I am predicting the Texans and Colts to have a higher placement in the division and being the better teams overall. So naturally, unless it's the AFC North, teams that are third place for the division either usually have a negative record or go 9-8. I also don't really have a lot of faith in this team since they had a pretty bad collapse last year. In the beginning of the last year, they had a great lead in their division and were on their way to winning it, but they choked really bad and didn't even make it to the playoffs after they somehow lost to the Titans in their final game. Looking over their wins and losses for the season, I have them winning both of their international games against the Patriots and Bears, and I think they will be swept by the Texans this year. I also don't think they'll really be able to beat most of the good teams on their schedule, so I have them being 7-10 and overall being a decent team. Finally, last place in the division, I have the Tennessee Titans, and I have them also going 7-10. And I know there's a lot of hype behind this team, and there's also some really good players, like L'Jarius Sneed, Tyler Boyd, and DeAndre Hopkins, to name a few, but there are still some major concerns that I have that makes me put them lower. First off, their division is going to be competitive this year, and despite their offseason moves, the other 3 teams in the division are still overall better. The Texans, Colts, and Jags have better quarterbacks, and Will Levis is not a good quarterback and is unreliable, with him having only 8 touchdowns and 4 interceptions last season. Also, their head coach, Brian Callahan, while he is proven to have a lot of offensive coaching experience, and was a good offensive coordinator with the Bengals. He, however, has no experience whatsoever on the defensive side of the ball. But that is another concern for me personally, since we don't really know if he'll be good for coaching for the defense. Going over their games, while I think the Titans are going to be a decent team this year, I have them going on a long losing streak, but I have them winning a lot of games in the last part of their season. I think if Brian Callahan turns out to be a decent head coach and they find a better quarterback, then the Titans could definitely be a scary team in the near future. But for now, I'm going to have to not buy the hype just yet. Now we are finally in the NFC, and I'll start with the West Division. And I think the San Francisco 49ers will win this division with a 13-4 record, and I have them being the first seed. Similar to last year, I have the San Francisco 49ers being a powerhouse team with a lot of great players on their team, like George Kittle, Nick Bosa, Christian McCaffrey, and Deebo Samuel, to name a few. Brock Purdy, while not being a perfect quarterback, is a great asset to the team and has proven to be reliable, especially for the postseason. Last year, they went 5-1 in their division, and since Kyle Shanahan has been head coach, the 49ers have made it to 4 championship games and 2 Super Bowls. Based off their schedule, I think they'll lose at least 1 game to the Rams, and when they face the Cardinals the second time, they will lose since that is the final game. Now I have them winning their division with a good lead, so they should rest their starters for that game. Despite their Super Bowl loss last year, I think they still have a great shot at winning one this year since they still have a pretty stacked team. Number 2 in the West, I have the Rams being second place with a 11-6 record and being the 6th seed. Last year, despite a lot of people not having faith in the Rams, myself included, they were able to win 10 games and make it to the playoffs despite their bad offensive line that year. And I think this year they will have a slightly better record since they have a lot of great players on their offense, and their offensive line has greatly improved compared to last year. Sean McVay is also a great coach, and I think with their schedule, they'll be a very competitive team this year, and I think they will go 4-2 in their division. I know that with Aaron Donald's departure, the defense on the Rams is definitely going to decrease, but it should still be solid overall. I think this will be a good football team this year. Number 3, we have the Seattle Seahawks, and I have them going 9-8, the same record as last year. And don't get me wrong, the Seahawks are a good and solid team this year, and I highly doubt they'll do worse than last year. But at the same time, they performed very poorly a year prior in their division, going 2-4, and were only able to beat the Cardinals the 2 times, who were also really bad last year. 49ers and Rams still have a better roster than the Seahawks, so I think they will struggle this year with their division and will get 3rd place. And like I said before, the 3rd place usually does not win double-digit games or will either go 9-8 or negative. Looking over their games, I think they will still go 2-4 in their division and will overall be a solid team, but will probably not make it to the playoffs unless certain teams get injured this year. Last place in the division, we have the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals do have a pretty good offense this year with players like Kyle Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Trey McBride, but sadly their defense is still really bad this year. Also, the Cardinals last year were awful in their division and were so bad they went 0-6. They couldn't even win a single game, and with their schedule this year, I have them going 6-11 and 2-4 in their division. and I have them winning some upsets like with their games with the Bills, Packers, and Seahawks. Next up, we have the NFC East, and I think this is a pretty easy pick, but I have the Philadelphia Eagles winning their division. And I know last year the Eagles were really bad by the end of the year when they choked winning their division, and they went from 10-1 to 11-6 and losing to bad teams like the Giants and Cardinals, and they got absolutely destroyed by the Buccaneers last season in the playoffs. But a big reason why the Eagles lost momentum was due to bad offensive and defensive coordinators. However, both Sean Desai and Brian Johnson were fired, so the Eagles should be back to being a great football team, since it wasn't that long ago they were NFC champions. Going over their games, I think they will be dominant in their division and will go 5-1 since most of the other East teams are bad and the Cowboys are most likely going to decline. So my final pick for the Eagles is 12-5 with the 3rd seed and could have a shot at winning the Super Bowl. For second place, we have the Dallas Cowboys, and I have them going 10-7 with them being the 7th seed. I know a lot of people do have the Cowboys with a worse record this year, with most people saying they'll either go 8-9 or 9-8. However, me personally, I don't think that's going to happen unless there are serious injuries, because yes, the Cowboys didn't really improve their roster this year, and they do have a harder schedule. They should still have enough talent to get second place in the East, and they have went 12-5 since 2021 and generally are good in the regular season. Based off their schedule, I have them beating most teams that are worse than the Cowboys, and I have them losing to most teams that are better than them. Since last year they struggled to beat good teams, and I don't think that's really going to change either. I also think that they won't do anything in the playoffs since Mike McCarthy and Dak Prescott underperform when the postseason time comes. Number 3, we have the Washington Commanders, and I have them going 6-11. While I think they will be overall a bad team, I do think there are going to be some bright spots this year with the Commanders. I do believe that rookies Jaden Daniels and Luke McCaffrey will have a solid starting year, and having Austin Eckler is a good sign for this team. With their schedule, I think the Commanders will be bad in their division and will go 1-5 since the Eagles and Cowboys are better. But since their schedule is easy this year, I think they will still win about 6 games, and maybe in the future they could be more competitive. Last place, we have the New York Giants, and if I'm being honest, I'm not 100% satisfied with my pick for them, but I do have them going 3-14. I think the Giants are going to be a bad team this season since Daniel Jones is a very unreliable quarterback, and I think most of their offense roster is bad besides Devin Singletary, although their defense is solid with players like Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence. However, when I look at their schedule, I just feel like almost all of their opponents are just better than them, and I doubt the offense will be able to do much against most of the teams they play against. Although I originally wanted to give them at least 4 or 5 wins, with how my picks turns out for all the teams, I will have to stay with the 3-14 record. Next up, we have the NFC North division, and I think the Detroit Lions will win the division again and will go 12-5 and will be the 2nd seed. So last season the Lions had a great year and won 2 playoff games, but sadly when they were in the NFC Championship game, they did choke a massive lead against the 49ers. I think they will still be a great football team this year since their biggest flaws last year was their secondary roster, but that has been greatly improved this year. For their schedule, I have them being 5-1 in their division, and I have them being a competitive team that could win a Super Bowl this season with their fired up roster. Second place, I have the Green Bay Packers, and I think they will be close to winning the division, but I think the Lions will get the slight edge, and I have the Packers going 11-6 and will be the 5th seed. Last year, despite the Packers having a lot of struggles in the regular season, mainly defensive problems due to Joe Barry being terrible at managing the Packers defense, they were still able to make it to the playoffs and destroyed the Cowboys despite being massive underdogs. The Packers also surprisingly put up a good fight against the 49ers in the divisional round, and even though it was a tough loss, I think the Packers are going to be great this year, and I have them being 5-1 in their division, and although I think they will lose some games to teams worse than them, I think they will still beat and be competitive against the top dogs on their schedule. Next up in 3rd place, we have the Chicago Bears, and while there are great expectations for the Bears, I'm not going to buy the hype just yet, and I have them going 8-9. Obviously, overall, the Bears have a solid team and don't have any major weaknesses, and have a lot of talent on this team like DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, and Keenan Allen. I still don't think they'll make it to the playoffs or go positive because not only is their division tough with the Lions and Packers, but they also have a rookie quarterback, and I think Caleb Williams will be a good quarterback in the future since he looked good in the preseason. But most of the time, rookie quarterbacks either have a decent start to their season or have a bad start. Going over their schedule, I have them losing to most of the good teams like the Lions, Packers, and 49ers, but I do think their overall easy schedule, they should beat most of the weaker opponents in their lineup. For last place in the division, I have the Minnesota Vikings, and I'm definitely not 100% sure with this pick, but I have them going 3-14 for their season. Although the Vikings do have a solid overall roster, the problem is that their quarterback selection is really bad, And since their starter for this year is going to be Sam Darnold, I just don't see them winning many games since he is really bad. And JJ McCarthy is out for the season due to his right meniscus being torn, so they don't really have a lot of options for their quarterbacks. Not to mention, I have a bad feeling that the Vikings are going to get unlucky this year since they already have their important players like Jordan Addison and JJ McCarthy being injured before the season even starts. And I don't think even Justin Jefferson could carry Sam Darnold that much, to be honest. I will admit I am being harsh with the 3-14 record, but I still don't think they'll win more than 5 games with their schedule, so I'll just stick with 3-14. For NFC South, I have the Atlanta Falcons winning their division. I have them going 10-7 and being the 4th seed due to the improvements that they made in the offseason and their easy schedule. The Falcons solved many of their problems this season. They got rid of Arthur Smith as head coach and brought in Raheem Morris to replace him, and I think this is a solid choice since Morris has had previous experience being a head coach and has served as training staff for both offense and defense and should get the job done with the roster he has. They also got rid of Desmond Ridder, who is a terrible quarterback, and replaced him with Kirk Cousins, who should still be good despite his old age. I have them winning their division in 10 games since the team is good all around and they have an easy schedule since the division is not that good and the games the Falcons have are very winnable games due to the placing 3rd in their AFC South last year. Next up for 2nd place we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and while I think the Bucs are still a solid team, unfortunately the Falcons have gotten significantly better, and since Tampa won the division last year, they're going to have a significantly harder schedule, and I have them going 9-8 because of that. Despite them losing to the division, I still think they will sweep the Saints and Panthers, and they will still be close with the Falcons, but I just don't think they'll have enough strength this year to win their division, although it definitely will be close for them at least. Number 3 for the division, we have the New Orleans Saints, and this year I think they'll be a decent team, so I'll go with 7-10 for their record. The reason I think the Saints will decline from last year is because Derek Carr is a very unreliable quarterback, and the Bucs and Falcons are just better. The Saints will also have tougher opponents this year. I don't really see them beating good teams like the Chiefs, Cowboys, Eagles, and Rams, but I still think they have enough skill to, at the very least, get a decent 7-10 record with their division. Last place in the NFC South, we have the Carolina Panthers, and I have them going 3-14. And I know the Panthers have technically gotten better this year. However, they were really awful last year, and to quickly summarize how bad their season was, they were shut out twice in a row during the last 2 games of the season with the Jags and Bucs. They won 0 road games, then the only 2 wins they have are last-minute field goals at home. So while I do agree that the Panthers did get better, I still think they're going to be bad and not improve that much. And looking at their upcoming games, I could see them losing to everyone on their schedule. While I do think they will win at least 3 games, I think they're all going to be hard-fought. And I know a lot of people do have the Panthers a little higher with 5 wins for the season, but for me personally, I'm going to have to go lower for them. So that's all my predictions for the 32 NFL teams for the 2024 season. And for the most part, I'm pretty happy with how my picks turned out. Although I think the Giants and Vikings will probably not go 3-14, and they will have slightly better wins, maybe in the 4-5 range. But with the way my picks turned out, I do have to lock them in at 3-14. But if you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and let me know in the comments down below what you think every team's record will be. And it doesn't matter how insane they are, I'm always curious to hear other people's opinions. And when Super Bowl 59 is over with, I plan on doing an NFL ranking video on all 32 teams for that season. Well, that's all I gotta say, so I'll see y'all later.